He thought his twin daughters were gone forever, lost to a tragedy that shattered his world. But 3 years later, on a crowded bus, he heard their voices singing. What he found that day didn't just break his heart, it shattered his entire life before it even began. Where are you watching this story? Let us know in the comments below. If these stories move you, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more unforgettable tales. Now, get ready to dive into this incredible journey. The blood on the rocks wasn't fresh, but it was enough to stop me in my tracks. I'd been walking since dawn, boots soaked from the marsh trail, stomach growling loud enough to scare off rabbits. I wasn't looking for trouble, not that morning, not ever really, but it has a way of finding me all the same. The smear of crimson curved down from the ridgeline and disappeared between the blackbark pines. The blood was thick, drying to a dark rust color in the mid-morning heat. I crouched beside it, ran a finger through the sticky trail, then brought it close to my nose. Not animal. Too much iron. Too human. Most folks would have turned back right then. There were too many stories floating around these parts about raiders, bounty hunters, even wild men with teeth, like wolves. But the longer I stared at that trail, the more something inside me twisted. Like I was looking at a mirror I couldn't quite see myself in, but I still knew it was mine. That's the part I can't explain. Why I didn't just keep walking. Why I followed the blood. The trees swallowed me in shadow as I pushed deeper. My rifle was slung across my back, not that I could hit the broad side of a barn with it, but the feel of it gave me courage. The air turned colder, heavier. Birds stopped singing. I moved slow, heel to toe, scanning every branch for movement. That's when I saw her. She was crumpled beneath a fallen tree, half buried in leaves and mud. Barefoot. Skin the color of river clay, hair wild and matted with pine needles. She looked no older than 16, maybe younger, and she wasn't moving. I thought she was dead until I stepped closer and saw her chest rise, just barely. A gash split her forehead. Her left leg was twisted wrong, swollen, and raw. Her dress was torn deerskin, faded beads still clinging to the seams. I didn't know her name. Didn't know where she came from or who was hunting her. But the second I saw her, something deep inside me shifted. I'd seen stray dogs looked at with more kindness than the way folks looked at me in town. And now I was looking down at someone who'd been abandoned the same way. I knelt beside her and touched her shoulder gently. Her eyes snapped open. She didn't scream, just stared. Dark eyes wide with panic, breathing sharp and shallow. Her lips moved, whispering something I couldn't understand, a language like wind through tall grass. But she tried to pull away, tried to crawl backward, pain etched into every movement. "It's okay," I whispered. "I'm not gonna hurt you." She didn't understand, but maybe she felt it. My hands were empty, my voice soft. I reached into my coat, slowly, and pulled out the last of my jerky, held it out. She hesitated, then snatched it with trembling fingers. Ate like she hadn't in days. And that was the beginning. I didn't know what I was doing, only that I had to do something. She couldn't stay out there, broken and bleeding. Not with wolves sniffing the wind and worse things walking on two legs. The pines were thick, but not thick enough to hide her forever. I knelt beside her again, eyes scanning her injuries. The leg was bad, swollen at the ankle and knee, bruised up to her thigh. She didn't speak, just watched me with those wide, silent eyes. If she screamed, it would have echoed clear to the settlement, but she didn't make a sound. That kind of silence tells you a lot about a person, tells you what they've seen, what they've learned to survive. "I'm gonna lift you," I told her, even though she couldn't understand. "I'm not leaving you out here." She winced as I slid one arm under her shoulders, another beneath her legs. Light as she was, I still staggered. Her body was warm, damp with sweat, and her blood stained the front of my shirt within seconds. She tensed at first, gripping the hide strap around her neck like a talisman. But when I didn't hurt her, when all I did was walk, she rested her head against my shoulder. For the first time in years, someone leaned on me like I mattered. My shack wasn't far, maybe a quarter mile through the woods. but carrying her turned it into a journey. The path wound along a slope strewn with roots and rocks, and each misstep sent fresh pain through her body. She gritted her teeth and held on, never cried out. Not once. I reached my home just as the sun began sliding behind the ridge. My place wasn't much, a cabin of scrap wood and stubborn nails behind the old mill, where no one from the town cared to look. Inside was a cot, a stove, a crate I used as a table, and not much else. I laid her gently onto the cot, pulled a faded quilt over her, and stoked the fire. She watched everything I did not, with fear anymore, but with caution. Her eyes followed my hands as I boiled water, tore an old shirt into strips, and poured whiskey into a chipped tin cup. When I dabbed the cloth into the liquid and moved toward her wound, she flinched. I paused. Then I pointed to my own leg, mimed pain, and pressed the soaked cloth gently against her ankle. She hissed and gripped the edge of the cot, but didn't pull away. I cleaned the blood, wrapped the wound, and did what little I could. For her head the gash wasn't deep, but head wounds bleed more than they should. I tied a strip of cloth across her brow and wiped the dirt from her face. By the time I finished, night had fallen. Outside, crickets sang and branches creaked in the wind. I handed her a cup of water, which she drank greedily. Then I sat on the floor, back against the door, rifle across my lap. Not for here. For what might come looking. She slept lightly, jerking at every noise. Sometimes she whispered in her sleep that same breathy language I couldn't make sense of, but she never opened her eyes. I didn't sleep. I just watched the door, and the window, and the trees beyond. Something about her being here had stirred up the woods. I could feel it. By morning, I knew two things. First, she wasn't from any tribe near here. Her beads, her dress, the way she spoke, they weren't local. I'd seen Comanche, Apache, even some Lakota trade groups pass through. But her people? They were strangers to this land. Second, someone was looking for her. There were footprints outside the shack. Fresh ones, not mine. They came up from the ridge and stopped just 20 feet from my door. No boot marks, only moccasins. 2 sets, no fire, no tracks leading away. Just prints and broken pine needles and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I didn't wake her, just sat by the door again and waited. But nothing came. She stirred a few hours later, blinking in the dim light, face pale with pain. I handed her a piece of bread, and she nodded just once in thanks. Then, with a soft voice that barely rose above the wind, she said her first word in English. Asha. I frowned. Asha? She pointed to herself. Asha. Her name. I repeated it, slower. Asha. A small smile touched her lips. Faint, but real. Then she pointed at me. I hesitated. Folks in town just called me boy or hey you. Never had much use for names since Ma and Pa died. Caleb, I said finally. Caleb Walker. She nodded again, then winced. Her leg needed rest. Maybe more than that, I wasn't a doctor. But I knew it wouldn't heal right if she kept moving. So we stayed hidden that day. I kept the fire low and the windows covered. Asha mostly slept. I mostly listened. The prints outside haunted me. I kept seeing them in my head, how they stopped, how they faced the door. They hadn't come to knock, they'd come to look. And they'd be back. That evening, I sat on the step sharpening my knife when she limped out of the cabin. Barefoot, wrapped in my coat, hair tangled like wind-blown moss. She stood beside me a long time, silent, watching the trees. Then she whispered, "Bad men." I looked at her. She pointed north. Chaya. Enemy. Chaya. I didn't know the word, but her tone said enough. Not just enemies. Monsters. She made a gesture with her hands circling something, then slashing through it. They took you? She hesitated, then nodded, then pointed east. My people. Far. Need go. You were running to them? Another nod. You fell? She pressed her hand to her leg. Creek. Water too fast. That explained the swollen ankle. She'd been fleeing when the river threw her against the rocks, left her half dead under a log until I found her. You got family there? She nodded. Father. Chief. My chest tightened. Of course. Of course she wasn't just anyone. She was a chief's daughter, and someone some rival tribe had either captured or chased her halfway across the territory, which meant her enemies wanted her back, dead or alive. That night, I didn't sleep again. Not because of the prince, not because of what I'd learned, but because, for the first time in a long while, someone else's fate rested in my hands. Not the sheriff's, not the town's, mine. Asha trusted me. I could see it in her eyes now, in the way she handed me the last of the jerky without asking, in the way she fell asleep just a few feet away instead of curled in the farthest corner. Trust like that changes you. And I think, maybe, it saves you too, because I'd spent 16 years trying to disappear. Now, for the first time, I had a reason not to. The third night, I smelled smoke. Not from my fire, I hadn't lit one since I found her. This was different. Dry, thin, carried on the breeze like a warning. Not close enough to see, but close enough to feel in my throat. Asha woke without me saying a word. She sat up on the cot, her eyes already searching the dark. She smelled it, too. Her hand reached for the beaded string around her neck, fingers tightening with every passing second. I stood by the window, careful not to pull the curtain. Just enough of a gap to peer through. The trees were still. The moon hung pale and sharp over the ridge. But there, east of the creek, line a faint glow, a fire too big for hunting. Too far off the trail for a settler camp. They were burning something, maybe signaling, maybe just to keep warm, but they were there. And that meant they were getting closer. I turned back to her. They're looking for you. She didn't answer, just looked down at her hands, then at her injured leg. Her jaw clenched. I could feel the questions burning inside her, whether she was slowing me down, whether I'd abandon her if it got worse. She didn't know me. Not really. And in her world, I suppose, trust was a currency spent carefully. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I reached into the crate under my bed and pulled out a small, oil-rubbed leather bundle. Inside, a pocket watch with no hands, a photograph of my mother holding a baby me, and a map. Hand-drawn. Not to scale, but enough. I unfolded it on the table between us and pointed to where we were. Here, I said. Then I tapped the far edge, where the hills rise into the Blueback Range. Your people? She leaned forward, scanned the terrain, then nodded. Far, she whispered. 3 days, maybe 4. That was 4 days of dodging men with blades and fire. 4 days of risking every step she took on that busted leg. 4 days of me hoping I could protect her with nothing but a half-loaded rifle, a dull knife, and the will to try. She looked up at me, uncertain. You help go? I didn't speak right away, just stared at the map, at the vast space between here and there, the rivers, the ridgelines, the unmarked graves. Then I looked at her. Yeah, I said, I'll help you get home. Her eyes softened, not with relief, not exactly, more like recognition. Like she saw something in me that made sense now. Like I wasn't just the boy who pulled her out of the dirt. I was someone who'd lost things too. We left at dawn. I strapped what I could onto my bag. 2 canteens, a bit of dried meat, the rifle, the knife, and a torn scrap of tarp to wrap around her leg. She leaned against me as we moved, her limp worse than before, but she didn't complain. The forest pressed in close as we slipped through it, always off the trail, always moving west of where the smoke had come from. I kept one eye on the ground, the other on the treetops. My ears strained for the snap of a twig, the flutter of a crow's wings. By midday, we'd reached the edge of the Black Hollow, a place folks in town never talked about unless they had whiskey in their gut and too little sense in their head. They said it was haunted, cursed. The land where tribes buried warriors without names. I didn't believe in curses, but I knew fear when I tasted it, and something in those trees tasted wrong. The air was heavier, the light dimmer. Even the wind seemed to avoid the place. But we had no choice. The fire last night told me the Eastern Trail was watched. They'd expect us to take the ridgeline or double back along the river. No one would expect us to go through Black Hollow. That was the point. Asha didn't ask questions as we entered the deadwood. She just wrapped my coat tighter around her shoulders and kept moving. I wondered how many places like this she'd walked through before, places where ghosts whispered and memories didn't stay buried. The deeper we went, the more the world faded. No birds, no insects, just the soft crunch of leaves under our feet and the occasional sound of her breathing beside me. Then a sound. Not loud, not near, just off. A low crack, like weight on an old branch. I froze. Asha stopped beside me. I crouched and pulled her down gently. Listened. Another crack, closer this time, followed by a whisper of movement, cloth on bark, leather against skin. Not animals. We were being tracked. I motioned to Asha, pressed a finger to my lips, and pointed toward a rock outcrop just ahead. She nodded once. No panic. Just understanding. I took her hand and we moved low, sliding across the moss and dirt until we reached the stones. Behind us, the forest was still again. Then the faintest flicker between two trunks, a shadow that wasn't there before. It paused, turned, moved again. Then another, two of them, maybe more. I could see the paint now, red streaks across their faces, hands marked in soot, spears in hand. One carried a bow, the string taut as he walked. They weren't searching. They were herding, pushing us forward, waiting for the right place to strike. They knew these woods better than I ever would. I gripped the rifle tight, heart pounding. I didn't know how to shoot under pressure. I'd only ever used it for crows and rattlers. But I figured if I had one shot to make count, it'd be for her. Asha grabbed my arm. She pointed. A gap in the rock, barely wide enough for a person. It sloped down a cave, maybe, or a wash tunnel from the spring rains. I didn't like the look of it, but I liked the idea of standing still even less. We moved. She slid through first, disappearing into the dark. I followed, scraping my back along the rock. Cold air hit my face, moist and still. I could barely see her hand ahead of me in the dark. We crouched low, breathing in the damp silence. Outside, I heard them. Footsteps. 2, then 3. They paused just beyond the rocks. One of them let out a soft whistle, almost like a bird call. A reply came from deeper in the forest. Then silence. They hadn't seen us. Yet. We stayed hidden until nightfall. The tunnel led into a narrow ravine, overgrown with moss and vines, hidden from above. It bought us time, but not safety. They were still out there, and they'd seen our tracks. As we made camp beside a dry stream bed, Asha finally spoke. "You saved me." I looked at her. No one saves me before. Only my father. You. Same. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't trying to be her father, or a hero. I just didn't want her to die alone in a place where no one would remember her name. She leaned closer. "You're not empty," she said. "You feel that way, but you're not." I stared into the fire, and for the first time, I didn't argue. The rain came hard that night. Not the soft kind that lullabies you to sleep. This was a wall of cold needles, slicing through branches and pounding the earth into mud. We huddled beneath the curve of a boulder in that narrow ravine. The canvas pulled over us like a dying skin. Wind tore through the cracks. My shirt stuck to my back. Asha shivered next to me, curled tight, her wounded leg twitching with each gust. We hadn't eaten in a day and a half. I'd given her the last of the dried meat 2 nights ago. My stomach felt like it had shrunk to the size of a coin. I wanted to believe we were safe, that the hunters had lost our trail in the rocks, but that was the kind of thinking that got people killed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Stalking shadows. Painted faces. The patient kind of predator. He didn't sleep. By dawn, the rain had eased into a steady drizzle. Fog lay thick over the trees like breath on glass. The world felt slower, like it was holding itself still, waiting to see what we'd do next. We started walking again. Her limp had worsened. I noticed her dragging the legs slightly now. She didn't mention it, and I didn't ask. Sometimes you don't speak a thing aloud, or it becomes real too fast. But I kept one hand near her elbow the whole time. Around midday, I smelled something. Smoke again. Not thick and dry like before this was fresh. Thin, pine sweet, controlled. A fire. Someone was nearby. I glanced at her. She nodded. She smelled it too. We crouched near a cluster of brambles and moved slow, crawling belly down toward the scent. Every sound felt louder than it should a snapped twig, my own heartbeat. The kind of tension that makes you forget to breathe. Then we saw it. A camp. Well, I'll be damned, he said. Boy, you look like hell. His name was Harlan. Said he'd been trapping along the ridgelines for near 20 winters, lived most of the year out in the woods, didn't care for towns or the folks in them. Called himself a student of silence, whatever that meant. He had a voice like crushed gravel and a stare that lasted longer than comfort allowed. But he gave us food. He let us dry our boots, warm our hands by the fire, even offered a sip of something strong that nearly burned a hole in my chest. Asha didn't drink, just sat curled in a blanket he handed over, her eyes flicking to his rifle every few seconds. She didn't trust him, not yet. Neither did I, but I knew how to pretend. You two running from something? He asked later, while chewing a hunk of salted meat. I shrugged. From everyone, I guess? Heckled. Aren't ve'ol. He didn't press, didn't ask where we were headed, just watched, quiet, calculating. That night, Asha slept in the lean-to while I stayed near the fire. Harlan poured another shot of his rot gut into a dented tin cup and handed it to me. You know who she is, don't you? He asked, his voice low. I froze. He took a sip from his own cup. I've seen the signs, he said. Painted trees, burned rocks. They're looking for her. Not you. He leaned closer. Problem is, they'll kill anyone who helps her. Doesn't matter how noble you feel. I stared at the fire. He wasn't wrong. She's not just some girl, he said. She's the chieftain's daughter. They think she was taken by force. If they find her with you... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I barely slept. Every hour, I opened my eyes to check if Harlan was still there. If the rifle was still on the log. If Asha was still breathing. At dawn, I woke her. We needed to leave. Before he changed his mind. Before he told someone. Before he decided to trade us in for peace with the war party crawling through the valley. But when we packed to leave, Harlan handed me something. A compass. Don't trust it too much, he muttered. She'll lie if you ain't looking. I nodded. Took it anyway. Then he looked at Asha. For the first time, he addressed her directly. They'll come with fire, he said. And when they do, you better hope this boy's willing to burn with you. She didn't answer, just stared into his eyes. Then we left. We climbed for hours that day, rising out of the hollow and into the thinner pines. The air smelled cleaner, drier. The threat of rain passed behind us. We crossed a stream where I let her soak her bandages, and I caught 2 frogs we boiled that evening. We said little. The world felt bigger now, more dangerous. And I couldn't stop thinking about what Harlan had said. When they come, you better hope he's willing to burn with you. Was I? Did I know? Or was I just another scared boy pretending to be brave because someone needed him to be? That night, she sat beside me by the fire. Her voice was low, barely above a whisper. You're different, she said. Since him. He didn't respond. He knows your kind, she said. How to make fear grow inside you. She looked at me. You don't let it grow. That's good. I wanted to believe that, but I knew better. The fear was already there. I just hadn't named it yet. The wind changed that morning. You can feel it when it happens, a shift in how the forest breathes. Like something's been disturbed. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but watching. Listening. We hadn't spoken much since Harlan's fire. We just walked. She leaned more on me now, her limp worsening, jaw clenched so hard I could hear her grind her teeth. The bandage on her leg was stained through. Red again. I knew what that meant. Infection. I didn't say it aloud, but the word rang in my head like gunshot. Around midday, we found it. An old mining outpost, carved into the bones of the hills, the kind the railroad companies abandoned when the gold dried up. Half a dozen buildings, most of them collapsed in on themselves, roofs eaten by rot and moss. A rusted ore cart lay tipped over in the weeds. Some tools still hung on nails, untouched for decades. But there were signs of recent life. A lantern. Footprints. A scorched log beside a circle of cold ash. Not many people knew this place was here. Whoever did, they'd left in a hurry. Or not far at all. We took shelter in the only structure still standing, the blacksmith's shed, low-ceilinged and cramped. The forge was long dead, but the stone walls held the wind back, and it smelled more like dust than death. I made a small fire in the chimney corner, no smoke, no light, just enough heat to keep her warm and boil water. Asha didn't protest. She didn't speak at all. Her leg had swollen. That scared me. More than the hunters, more than the dark. Because that was something I couldn't shoot at, couldn't outrun. I remembered something my father once said after Mama died of fever. Sometimes the body gives up before the soul does. That's the cruel part. She hadn't given up, but her body might. That night, while she slept, I went looking. If this place had been lived in, even briefly, there had to be something left behind. Medicine, tools, anything. I searched 3 buildings before I found a cellar door, half buried under pine needles behind the old saloon. Rusted hinges. Chains snapped. Something had torn it open. I lit a stick, climbed down slow. It smelled like mold and piss. But it wasn't empty. There were crates, bottles, cloth. Someone had been storing things here, living off it maybe. Or waiting. I took what I could carry. A tin of salve, 2 strips of clean linen, dried beans, and a small brown vial wrapped in leather. When I turned to leave, I saw it. A mark on the wall, carved deep into the wood, almost ritual-like. A sun split in half. I didn't recognize it. But it looked wrong. Old, maybe. Or older than old. Back in the shed, I cleaned her wound again. She winced but didn't pull away. I opened the vial. Smelled it. It was bitter sharp like pine tar and metal. Medicine, maybe, or poison. I dipped the cloth in it and pressed it to her leg. She screamed, but didn't push me off. When it was done, she collapsed against the stone, breathing ragged. I sat beside her, watching the shadows dance on the wall. I saw a symbol, I said quietly, carved down in the cellar. Her eyes opened. What kind? Sun. Broken into. She went still. For the first time since I met her, I saw fear. Not the fear of being hunted. This was deeper, personal. That's not from my people, she whispered. That's older. Older than yours? She nodded. Shadow walkers, she said. Spirits that live between fire and dark. They wear faces made of ash and take voices from the dying. I wanted to laugh. I didn't. Because I believed her. Because I'd seen enough now to know the world was stranger than it looked. The next day, it snowed. Not heavy, just a flurry. But it changed everything. Our tracks, our heat, our trail, and theirs. Because they were coming again. I saw them just before dusk. 3 figures on the far ridge. Painted faces. One had a bow. The other 2 carried spears. Scouts. Watching. Not attacking yet. That scared me more than gunfire. They were waiting. For something. We stayed inside the forge that night. I stacked stones against the door. Buried the fire. Sat with the rifle across my knees and her head in my lap. She was burning up again. Mumbling in her sleep. Words I didn't understand. Names that weren't mine. At some point near dawn, something scratched at the wall. Not loud. Not frantic. Just slow, curious. Like it didn't care whether we heard it or not. I raised the rifle. Held my breath. The scratching stopped. Then came the whisper. Not hers. Not mine. From outside. Right up against the stone. You took what belongs to Ash. I froze. My heart was thudding so loud I thought she'd wake. But she didn't. She just whimpered in her sleep. I waited. An hour, maybe more. Nothing else came. But I didn't put the rifle down. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because the silence had changed. It wasn't the kind of silence you find in an empty forest. It was too thick, too still, like sound itself was afraid to move. The fire had gone out hours ago. The stones I'd stacked at the door were cold. Asha slept restlessly, her body twitching under the fever. Her breath was shallow, short, like it hurt to inhale. And outside, whatever it was still there, watching, waiting. I kept the rifle on my lap and my hands steady on the stock. I tried to convince myself it had only been a man, maybe one of the hunters playing tricks in the dark. But the way that whisper had slid across the stone, not spoken but felt, it stayed with me. You took what belongs to Ash. By morning, I found footprints. Just one set, bare, wide, and too long to be human. They circled the shed. Once. Twice. Then vanished into the tree line. Not walked away, vanished. No drag marks, no trail, just snow undisturbed, like it had never been there. But I knew it had. Asha stirred when I returned, sweat glistening on her brow. Her lips cracked when she spoke. Something's wrong. I didn't need to answer. She already knew. We left the blacksmith's shed behind by midday. I made her a makeshift crutch out of a fence post, but she could barely manage 5 steps before collapsing. I had no choice but to carry her again. Her weight had dropped. She felt too light in my arms. I wrapped her in a blanket, kept the rifle strapped across my back, and headed north. I didn't know exactly where we were going, only that we couldn't stay. Not with them behind us, and not with that thing whatever it was lingering in the snow. The woods thickened as we climbed. Pines gave way to twisted junipers, their limbs tangled like clawed hands. The sun barely pierced the canopy. Every step sank deeper into snow and silence. My legs ached. My shoulders burned. But I kept moving. And then I saw it. Smoke. Not thick, not rising like a campfire, but thin and constant, curling through the air like breath. It came from between 2 hills, just beyond a frozen creek. Shelter. Maybe people. Maybe safety. But my gut told me otherwise. The cabin was ancient, built into the stone like it had always been there. No windows, just a door made of 2 rough planks bound with rawhide and ash-stained hinges. Animal skulls hung from the eaves, tied with braided horsehair. Symbols carved into every beam. Some I recognized from old trapper stories. Others, I didn't. But all of them said one thing: stay out. I stood at the threshold for a long time. The wind had stopped. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Asha's voice was weak behind me. You can't take me in there. Her eyes were wide, not pleading, not angry. Terrified. I won't leave you out here, I said. She didn't answer. I pushed the door open. The smell hit first earth and iron and old blood. The inside was dark, lit only by a narrow shaft of sunlight through a hole in the roof. The floor was packed dirt, but smooth, swept clean. A single cot lay against the wall, draped in animal skins. Beside it, a circle of stone and ash, and in the center, a mask, charred black, made of bark or bone I couldn't tell. Its mouth wide, eyes hollow, just sitting there, waiting. I didn't touch it. I laid Asha down on the cot and covered her in the skins. I'll find something to start a fire, I whispered. She didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the mask. In the far corner, I found a bundle of dried herbs, jars filled with what looked like crushed roots, and a pile of yellowing pages handwritten in some mix of English and another script I didn't know. I didn't waste time. Just started mixing what looked like antiseptic boiled water. Crushed something that smelled like pine and salt. I applied it to her leg. She screamed again, then went limp. I thought I'd killed her. But after a minute, her chest rose again, slow and deep. Still alive. Still fighting. I buried the fire deep in the hearth, using only twigs and moss to keep smoke down. The warmth helped. Her color returned, just a little. I sat with my back to the wall, rifle in my lap, knife by my boot, eyes on the door. It was nearly dusk when I heard it again. That same voice whispered across the timber. She carries ash. You carry guilt. I stood up, heart thudding. But the voice didn't come from outside. It came from the mask. I don't know what made me do it, but I picked it up, and suddenly, I was somewhere else. Not dreaming. Not awake. Standing in the same cabin, only it was whole newly built, fire blazing in the hearth, someone singing outside. Then a scream, then blood. Smoke, the cabin burning, figures running. A girl young, dark-haired, dragged by men in dust-covered boots. The same men from the auction. My hands weren't mine. They held a rope, a brand, and I realized what I was seeing. Not a vision, a memory. Notmine. The mask dropped from my hands. The room snapped back into darkness. I stumbled backward, gasping. Asha was sitting up now, eyes wide. You saw it, she said. I don't know what I saw. You saw what they did, long ago. I nodded. Her voice was steadier now. They hurt my people, killed them, took from them, then buried their sins in fire and ash. But fire remembers. The woods remember. I stared at her. And you? I'm what's left, she said. Not bitter, not proud, just true. I was born under the broken sun, marked by it. My father said the spirits made me as a warning. I used to think it was a curse, and now I think it's a compass. That night we didn't sleep. The whispering never stopped. Voices that didn't speak words, just thoughts, guilt, grief, hunger. Like the trees themselves mourned. At some point, Asha sat up, eyes clear for the first time in days. They're coming, she said. I didn't ask who. I knew. And this time, it wasn't just the hunters. It was all of them. The past. The forgotten. The ash. They came before the moon did. First, it was the wind, a sudden, sharp gust that made the trees shudder and the smoke curl backward down the chimney. Then came the sound of boots, but not hurried. Not charging. A slow, deliberate march. One set. Then another. And another. Within minutes, the cabin was surrounded. I peeked through a crack in the wood. 5 of them, maybe 6. Shadows of men. Lanterns swinging from thick hands, rifles low but ready. Their eyes searched the woods, not the door. Like they knew something was watching from the trees, not us. And maybe they were right. Asha didn't move. She sat wrapped in skins on the cot, staring at the mask I'd thrown to the far corner. The air around her had changed, heavier, thicker, like even the fire was afraid to burn too bright. They smell it, she whispered. The past, the ash. I didn't ask how she knew. I just loaded the rifle. When the knock came, it was almost polite. 3 slow raps, no voice, just the wood meeting skin. I didn't answer. Then a voice, gruff and low. We know what you found, boy. The girl ain't yours. Step aside, and no harm comes to you. I said nothing. Another voice now, older, maybe the one in charge. You don't understand what you're protecting. She ain't just some stray. She's a curse. She's what's left of something we buried a long time ago. Let her go. Still, stayed silent. The fire cracked. Outside, the snow began to fall. Asha turned to me. Her eyes weren't scared anymore. They were calm, steady. You don't have to fight for me, she said. I shook my head. I'm not. I'm fighting because I didn't the first time. Her eyes didn't waver, just nodded once. Then she took the mask in her hands. The moment she touched it, everything changed. The fire dimmed. The wind stopped. And I swear, I heard the trees groan like old bones. Then, from the walls themselves, the ash began to rise. It came like smoke but moved like water. Tendrils of gray and black swirling up from the floor, the fireplace, the cracks in the walls. It didn't choke. It didn't burn. It watched. The men outside must have seen it too, because suddenly there were shouts. One of them fired a shot into the trees. Another dropped his lantern. The snow caught fire. Panic. Then the door burst open. He came in fast, a big man, beard like a bear, shotgun raised. I didn't have time to aim. Just threw myself forward. The blast grazed my shoulder, heat and thunder ripping past my ear. I hit him in the gut, slammed him back against the doorframe. We struggled, fists in wood and fire. Then Asha screamed, not in pain, in rage. The kind of scream that splits the world. The ash moved. It surged forward like a tide, not touching the floor, not touching us, just him. He froze. His eyes went wide, mouth open like he wanted to scream, but nothing came out. The ash wrapped around his head, his arms, his chest. Then he was gone. Not dead. Not vanished. Just scattered. His shotgun clattered to the ground. I looked at Asha. Her hands still held the mask. Her face was wet with tears. They don't want blood, she whispered. They want memory. Outside, the others ran. One fired into the woods, shouting curses. Another begged for forgiveness. But the ash followed. It didn't kill. It showed. It made them see. Made them feel everything they'd buried. The fires, the brands, the screams, the truth. And one by one, they fell to their knees. Not in death, in surrender. By morning, the snow was untouched again. The ash was gone. The mask lay still in the corner. And the forest was quiet. Too quiet. Asha stood beside me at the threshold, her legs still weak, but her eyes stronger than I'd ever seen. We're not done, she said. And I knew she was right. The past had woken up, but justice, that was still coming. The dawn broke slow and heavy, as if the earth itself was too tired to wake. The snow lay thick, muffling the sounds of the forest, but inside me a storm raged louder than any thunder. I had seen things no 16-year-old should, spirits made of ash, curses older than the oldest trees, and men broken not by bullets but by their own pasts. But none of that mattered now, because the hunters were coming back. Not just a few desperate men in the dark. No, a whole militia, with guns, horses, and a hunger for blood. I looked down at Asha's legs, swollen, raw, barely holding her up. Her dark eyes met mine with something fierce. Can you ride? I asked. She didn't hesitate. I can fight. I wished I had the same certainty. We packed what little we had. The mask, some dried meat, a flask of water, and a few bullets. No one could know where we were. We moved fast, slipping through the forest like shadows, the trees our only allies. Every snap of a twig, every whisper of the wind set my nerves on edge. I held the rifle tight, scanning for movement. The hunters would come from the south. We were heading north. The path was treacherous. Steep cliffs, frozen streams, and thorny underbrush. Every step was a gamble, every breath stolen. But Asha's spirit was unbroken. She told me stories in whispers, legends of her people, the old ways, and the sacred bond with the land. Stories of warriors who could call the wind, bend the trees, and walk between worlds. I wanted to believe, because if I didn't, the cold might kill me first. 3 days passed. The fever hadn't broken. Her strength waned, but her will did not. One night, beneath a hollow moon, we made camp near a creek swollen with spring melt. I sat beside her, trying to keep the fire alive. Suddenly, a howl shattered the silence, sharp, long, and filled with hunger. I froze. Asha smiled faintly. They come for the blood, she said. I didn't ask who, because I already knew. At dawn, the hunters found us. 30 strong, faces hard as stone, rifles ready. Their leader, a man called McGraw, stepped forward, his eyes cold and cruel. You have something that belongs to us, he said. I didn't answer. Asha stood beside me, despite her pain, holding the mask like a shield. McGraw sneered. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." I raised my rifle. "We understand enough," I said. The battle was brutal and swift. Bullets tore through branches and flesh. Asha moved like a ghost, fierce and fast. I fought with desperation, fueled by fear and hope. We were outnumbered, outgunned, but not outwilled. When the smoke cleared, McGraw lay bleeding, the mask shattered at his feet. The hunters scattered like frightened crows. Asha collapsed in my arms. Tears traced the dirt on her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, you saved us." That night, as she rested, I carved a mark on a tree, a symbol of our fight. A promise? We would survive, together. The forest seemed to hold its breath, every leaf trembling under the weight of what was coming. I felt it in my bones, the past and present converging, a storm ready to break loose. The snow lay thick beneath our feet, muffling our footsteps, but it couldn't silence the roar pounding inside my chest. Asha was awake now, her fever broken, but something in her eyes had changed. There was a fire in them, fierce, burning, wild. She was no longer just the injured girl I had found by the creek. She was a warrior reborn, carrying the legacy of a people who had suffered too much to ever bow. We moved cautiously through the thick pines, knowing the militia was hunting us relentlessly. Every crack of a twig made me jump. Every shadow seemed alive. The bitter cold bit into my skin, but the warmth inside me, the fierce need to protect Asha, kept me going. She leaned on her crutch, her steps unsteady but determined. "Your people will come," I said quietly, trying to sound sure even as doubt gnawed at me. "They won't leave you alone." Her dark eyes searched the horizon, cold and clear. "They must. If they don't, we die here." The weight of those words settled heavily on us both. For days we had been running, hiding, fighting the cold and the hunters alike. But the forest was vast, and the bond between Asha and her people was stronger than I had dared hope. On the third day, as the sky darkened with heavy clouds, a distant thunder began, not of storm but hooves. The Dakota warriors appeared on the ridge like ghosts summoned by ancient blood ties. Mounted and armored, their faces painted with war colors, they came down the slopes with a power that shook the earth. At their head rode Takakota, the chief himself. His presence was massive, an unyielding force of nature. The sight of him brought a strange mix of fear and hope crashing into my chest. Asha straightened, her crutch forgotten as she stood tall, radiant in spite of her exhaustion. Takakota dismounted slowly, his eyes locking onto mine. I felt his gaze pierce me, measuring every ounce of the boy who dared carry his daughter through fire and blood. "You carry my daughter through fire and blood," he said, his voice deep and unyielding. "You are no longer alone." His words were a balm to wounds I didn't know. I had a promise that the lonely orphan boy might finally find a place to belong. But our reunion was not without cost. Before the warriors could fully surround us, the militia struck a desperate, furious charge from the south, guns blazing and voices shouting. The hunters had tracked us relentlessly, driven by greed and fear. What followed was a battle unlike any I had ever seen, a clash, not just of weapons, but of legacies. Arrows screamed through the air, rifles roared like thunder, and the ground trembled beneath the fury of warriors who fought with honor and desperation. I fought beside Takakota and Asha, no longer a bystander but a brother in arms. Each breath was stolen, each heartbeat a victory. The militia was fierce, but the Dakota were fiercer. The land itself seemed to rise to their defense. Hours passed in a blur of smoke and blood. When the last hunter fell, silence reclaimed the valley, heavy, absolute. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the battlefield. The scent of pine and blood mingled, bittersweet and raw. Takakota approached me once more, his eyes weary but proud. "You are family now," he said, the weight of his words grounding me. For the first time, I believed it. As we tended to wounds and buried the fallen, Asha leaned on me, her strength spent, but her spirit unbroken. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice low. I squeezed her hand. "Me too. But together," she said, "we are more than fear. We are the past and the future." I nodded. The scars we carried would never fully heal. The past was a shadow we could never outrun. But with Asha, with Takakota's people, I was ready to face whatever came next. Because belonging wasn't about blood or place. It was about who stood by you when the world turned its back. That night, beneath a sky splattered with stars, we gathered around a fire. The warriors told stories, tales of ancestors, battles, losses, and victories. Their voices strong and sure, weaving a tapestry of resilience and hope. I listened, learning what it meant to be part of something greater than myself. The mask, now whole again, rested near the flames, a symbol of pain and power, of ashes rising from destruction. And I knew our journey was far from over. The forest had grown silent, but inside me, a storm raged fiercer than ever. The weight of everything, fear, hope, loss, and love, pressed down on my chest like the heaviest of burdens. Yet, beneath that weight, I felt something else, something new, a purpose, a destiny shaped not by blood alone, but by the choices I had made. For 16 years, I was an orphan boy with no name, no home, no family. But today, as the last embers of the fire flickered beneath a blanket of stars, I was something more. I was a son, a brother, a warrior, part of a legacy that stretched beyond the forests, the rivers, and the mountains, beyond the boundaries that once confined me. The journey to this moment had been carved with hardship. Every step taken alongside Asha had pulled me deeper into a world I barely understood but fiercely loved. The girl who had once cowered beneath a fallen log, eyes wild with fear and pain, was now standing tall, fierce, proud, unbroken. Her leg healed, but more importantly, her spirit burned brighter than ever. Together we had faced down hatred, the bitter venom of men like Samuel Crow, who saw difference as a threat and compassion as weakness. We had fought shadows, rival warriors who chased us like ghosts of death. And through it all, we had learned what it truly meant to belong. The Dakota warriors had arrived just in time, their war cries echoing through the valley like thunder, announcing a reckoning. Takakota, the chief, a man whose very presence commanded the earth to steady beneath his feet, had looked at me with eyes that held centuries of wisdom and sorrow. "You carry my daughter through fire and blood," he had said, his voice a deep river flowing with honor. "You are no longer alone." Those words struck deeper than any bullet ever could. In that moment, I understood that family was not a chain that bound, but a flame that warmed. The battle with the militia was brutal, a clash not just of weapons, but of worlds. Bullets tore through trees, arrows sliced the cold air, and screams mingled with the roar of hooves and gunfire. Yet, amid the chaos, I found strength in the unity around me. Fighting alongside warriors who once were strangers, I felt the power of shared purpose. When the last enemy fell, and silence returned, the weight of survival settled over us. We had won, but the cost was etched in every scar, every broken branch, every whispered prayer for the fallen. Now, as night cloaked the valley, I sat by the dying fire, surrounded by those who had become my family. The mask, once a symbol of pain and fear, lay repaired beside me, a testament to resilience. The stories told by the elders wove a tapestry of courage, sacrifice, and hope that wrapped around my heart like the softest of furs. I thought of the creek where it all began, the place where I found Asha lost, scared, but alive. That creek still whispered its secrets, and so did the forest, reminding me that every end was also a beginning. Asha leaned close, her breath warm against the chill night air. "Do you think we'll ever be truly safe?" she asked softly. I looked into her eyes, those fierce, unyielding eyes, and answered honestly, "No. But it doesn't matter. Safety isn't a place. It's the courage to stand when the world tries to break you." She smiled, the kind of smile that holds the promise of dawn. "We fight for that." for a future where no one is alone. Takakoda approached, his steps steady. The world beyond the forest may never understand us, he said. But here you are, a son, a warrior, a keeper of our stories. He placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. Your journey is just beginning, Eli. The legacy you carry is not just of blood, but of heart. In that moment, surrounded by firelight and shadows, I felt a peace I had never known. The boy who once wandered the wilderness alone had found his place among warriors, friends, and family. Years would pass, seasons would change, but the bond forged in that crucible of fear and hope would endure. And so I tell you this story not just to remember where I came from, but to remind you that belonging is a choice, a fire that burns in the darkest nights, a hand reached out when all seems lost. Because sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with swords or bullets, but with the courage to care. And sometimes the strongest family is the one we choose. If you were in the main character's shoes, would you fight the same battle? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video. Be sure to explore the other videos on your screen for more gripping stories.